Today is Wednesday, January 6, 2016, and we are interviewing Lynne Sansevero at the Santa Cruz Public Library in Santa Cruz, California. My name is Jeannie Zarnicki, and David Addison is recording. We both work for the Santa Cruz Public Library System. Lynne, when and where were you born?
I was born in the Bronx, New York in 1964 at Bellevue Hospital.
And what was your branch of service and your highest rank?
U.S. Regular Army. I was an E4.
Okay. And let's start this off with having you tell us about your family background and what you were doing before you joined the military.
Okay, so my family is an immigrant Italian-American family. I'm second-generation American. My parents grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. And my grandparents lived with us almost all of my life, my young life. Very big family, some nefarious deeds going on in that family. I think the grandparents are trying the best they could to get by. Heavily into the whole Italian Roman Catholic culture. When I was 7 years old, my father moved us in the middle of the night to our shore house in Mystic Islands, New Jersey, which was just our little 800 square foot summer home on the water. He'd gotten into some trouble. What that is, I'm not still exactly sure. He's passed now and he never really told me what the truth was. But I left the Bronx and we moved to this little island, Barrier Island, off the coast of New Jersey. It's about an hour's drive north of Atlantic City and about 20-minute boat ride north of Atlantic City. So we just picked up everything lock, stock, and barrel with my two sisters and my mom, and we moved into this little home. My dad then became a fisherman. He was a crabber and a clammer on the bay there. And that's what they call back there a bay man. So I grew up most of my younger years working on the boat with him, clamming and crabbing and selling stuff. We were really, really poor. Really poor. It's almost sustenance living. My mom worked as a drugstore. She worked in a drugstore forever. And she was actually pretty popular in the neighborhood. Everybody knew my mom. Stormin' Norman. So her name was Norma. So they used to call her Stormin' Norman because she was hot, red-headed, hot-blooded Italian lady who took no shit from anyone. And then, let's see, I was real good at school, real good at school, and always made the honor roll and always kind of was a little bit of a standout. I was the youngest of the three girls. There's a 10-year difference between myself and my older sister and a 7-year difference between the middle sister and myself. I was kind of an afterthought. And so I did well enough in school that I could graduate a year early because I never took a study hall or anything like that, and I was pretty good academically. So I decided that I wanted to graduate high school when I was in my sophomore year. My junior year would be my last year because I had enough credits to do that. So I had planned to go to Rutgers University. That was kind of my dream alma mater. And I wanted to do engineering. And I took the paperwork to my parents to sign because we were too poor and we would need financial aid, and I was obviously a minor. I couldn't just enroll myself in college. So my counselor and I got everything together. I wrote my essay. I was pretty much a shoo-in for Rutgers, and my parents wouldn't sign the paperwork. They wouldn't apply for a loan. They wouldn't sign the paperwork to get me in. And they pretty much just shot my hopes of college down. So Armed Forces recruiter came to my high school, and I thought, I gotta get off this island somehow. So there was, at the time, I don't know if there's any more, you could sign up while you were still in high school, and then as soon as you graduated, you got pretty much shipped off. So I was 17 when I left, and my parents did have to sign that paperwork to allow me to join the service, and they did. So I was shipped off to Fort Dix after I graduated, and I spent, oh gosh, I think 3 or 4 weeks waiting at Fort Dix because we were the first all-female brigade, and they had to wait for enough females to come to get enlisted in order to make a brigade, which is I think around 500 women. And I was in Company B. And so we waited, and I pretty much just mopped floors and waxed floors and peeled potatoes and did all the stuff that you do in basic training, except for the actual basic training. Did that for many, many weeks while women trickled in, and we had enough people for a company and a brigade. I was the youngest person in my company. Very few pieces of advice my dad ever offered me. One of them was the day before I left to get shipped off was don't ever volunteer for anything in the Army. So I was in formation, and we had enough women for a company. I think there were 35 women in Company B, and I was in the furthest row you could be in, way in the back, trying to lay low and hide. My dad's advice echoing in my ears. And my drill sergeant said, I need a platoon guide. Who amongst you wants to be the leader of this platoon? And I was like, no, I was hiding. And then he just somehow he went, you, way in the back. Damn. He saw me. He's like, you're going to be platoon guide. I was like, gosh, yeah. So I got my platoon. And I was with a bunch of interesting women. I think they were really trying hard to get this brigade of women together because there were people who were, majority of them were from Detroit and were from really poverty-stricken areas. A lot of them were prostitutes that had gotten arrested so many times that they were given the option of either joining the military or serving time, and people who were in some kind of precarious legal situation where they were given that option. And so I had a lot of pretty badass chicas in my platoon who did not like a white girl who was 17 telling them what to do. So I had 2 drill sergeants. One was kind of a mentor to me, was really a nice guy, straight up, and one guy wasn't so good, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So I was just doing my thing, trying to be a leader. I was 17. I was super green. I don't think I'd ever seen a black person before up until that point. I mean, in the Bronx I had, but certainly I'm living on Mystic Islands. It was just all white immigrant European families. And so it was a big culture shock for me, and really hard. It was really, really hard. So I think the first seminal thing that happened was I was in basic training and on guard duty I don't even know what the hell I was guarding, but we each had to take turns doing different things. And I was on guard duty in this big tower with my M16 and all that. And my drill sergeant came in and raped me in the guard tower. And I was, let's see, I don't think I was 18 years old yet. And I didn't tell anybody because, he told me I would get kicked out, and he told me not to tell anybody, and he would make life visible for me if I said anything. So I didn't. Sorry. What made it worse was that I was gay, and I knew I was gay since I was 13, and that was my first experience, and only experience with a man, was that rape in the guard tower at Fort Dix. So that happened. I was pretty wrecked, but I had to keep going. I was in the middle of basic training, and it was winter, and it was cold, and I had this platoon to lead, and that was shortly followed by a really weird thing that happened where I was in formation one day with my platoon, and my sergeant came up to me and he said that the brass at command wanted to talk to me, to run down there, because you didn't walk anywhere. You ran everywhere you went. So I ran down to command center, and there was a captain there who told me that my ASVABs, which is the test you take to get into the military, I guess I almost had like a perfect score on them. And they wanted me to go to this informational event about joining West Point. So they asked me if I would like to do that, and I said, I guess, I don't know. I was pretty shot out. And so they walked me over to this hall where it was like a movie theater, and there were maybe like 30 of us in there, 30 women from all different companies. And they showed this video about West Point and all that, and basically said, this is what it entails. You'd go to pre-training for an academy for a year in New Jersey somewhere, and you would get, they would see how you could do under the pressure of all the academic pressures. You'd get more testing. It's kind of like to see if you can make it. And then if you pass that, then they actually send you to West Point. And the thing that they also told me was that if you went to that academy and you didn't pass, that they could pick whatever AIT they wanted for you. So, that's your advanced training. So I was going in for, my AIT was going to be health related, and I wanted to be a medic and a preventative medicine specialist, because that's kind of what I was drawn to. And he said, if you don't pass this 1 year, we can put you in whatever job we need you in at the time. So I could end up being anything. A cook, I had all these horrible ideas of being like a bottle washer for the next 4 years, and because I couldn't hack it academically at this place. So I turned it down. I decided not to go, and that was right after the rape happened too, so I wasn't really, and I was a latchkey kid. I had no one to talk to. I had nobody. I was completely alone. So so I never went to college, and I didn't get to go to West Point. That's probably one of the biggest regrets I have in my life. So anyway, I went through basic training, and I was like top of my class and basically, top of my company in basic training. I outperformed everybody physically. I was really pretty athletic at the time and really in shape, and I did really well. I did really well in basic. Besides the rape, I actually enjoyed the structure. I enjoyed the military. I enjoyed the job. I liked that it was different every day. So I graduated from basic, and then I got asked to do a recruiting stint for 3 months in my hometown. So I got to go home for 3 months and work in the local recruiting place there. And I was in a couple local newspapers, hometown girl, does well, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't recruit anybody though, so I guess I wasn't so good at it. They only kept me there for, I think, 3 months, and then they shipped me off to AIT, which was in Fort Sam Houston, Texas. So I think they're different, and they're different call letters now, but I was 91B, which is medic, combat medic, and then I went to 91S training, which is preventative medicine specialist. And so my job, obviously as a medic, was EMT work and paramedic work, and then my job as a 91S was anything that was communicable that could cause illness to the troops. That's what a 91S deals with. So I was trained in, and that was a long AIT. That my AIT for that was 9 months in San Antonio, which is pretty long. It's pretty long Army training. It was more academic, I think, than a lot of things, and I learned everything from how to inspect warehouses, and I had to inspect, like do food inspection, how to do inspection of messes and roach coaches, and so basically health inspector. And then I also was a medic, and I also did sexual transmitted diseases, so I did a rotation in a VD clinic, and my friends used to laugh all the time because I was a pecker checker. That's what they call me, pecker checker. So the experience in Fort Sam Houston, I loved it. I cried when I left there. I loved San Antonio. I was on the Riverwalk every chance I got. The atmosphere there was really collegiate and academic. It was the closest to like college I thought I was ever going to get. And I love to learn, so I was really, really happy. And it also kind of, the combat medic training made me feel really assured, and I was really riding high after that 9 months and doing really well. And then right toward the end of that training, I was walking home from the Enlisted Men's Club. So at Fort Sam Houston, you used to have to walk to the Enlisted Men's Club through this kind of dark path that went through some wooded areas. And I was walking home from the Enlisted Men's Club, and I heard like a yelp out in the woods. And I didn't know what it was. At first I thought it was like an injured animal, and I went back there, and I found a girl who had just been raped. The shit had been beaten out of her really bad. Her face was completely cut open, her eyes were swollen shut, her pants and her panties were still around her legs. She was hysterical crying. And I found her there, laying in the woods, and of course I immediately went into my own little PDS. I think I left my body big time. But I did pull it together enough to get her up and get her to some help. And it was a really weird experience because she didn't want me to leave her. Like, after we got, the MPs came and got her, and she wouldn't let go of me. So I basically ended up staying with her all through the hospital and the rape kit and all of that. And it was really hard on me. And he did eventually get convicted of that crime. She was able to tell the people at the hospital what he looked like, and she actually saw his name on his uniform. His dummy wore his uniform when he did it. And so they found him. He was a trainee on the post. She was permanent party. I didn't know her, I didn't work with her, but they did court-martial him, and he did serve time. I found out later. So that was pretty seminal event for me. So basically, I was just kind of a loner during these first year and 15 months or so of my experience in the Army, because of what happened to me, because I was 17 and I was the only white girl, and I was the youngest girl in basic, and then I got beat up a bunch in basic training, because they didn't like a 17-year-old white girl from New Jersey telling them what to do. They have these things called blanket parties. I don't know if you ever heard of these, where you're asleep at night in your cot, and they come and they throw a blanket over you, and they hold, like 4 people hold the ends of the blanket down so you can't move, and then they just beat the shit out of you, so you can't defend yourself. So that happened to me in basic as well. Looking back, I kind of like in basic training to jail. I mean, I learned a lot of things, but I think it really prepared me for was like how to go to jail. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad, and I don't think they really knew what to do, because we were all female platoon. They couldn't come in. Like, our drill sergeant just didn't have the access that I think if we had a female sergeant who could come in and be in there and just walk in at any time. They didn't quite know how to handle it or something, I think, in retrospect, when I think about that. They didn't quite know how to handle this all-female training, basic training, and there were major flaws there, and a lot of abuse happened, a lot of abuse. And, obviously rape. So, I mean, if he did it to me, I'm sure he did it to other women. I never asked. So when I did enlist, I knew I was gay. I knew I was gay since I was 13. And I told my mom I liked girls. And she looked at me and she said, "Can't you try to like boys?" And I said, "Nope, I like girls." But, so I was ostracized, and that was part of the reason for wanting to get out of high school early. High school was pretty rough for me too. I learned several things in high school: how to stick up for myself, how to fight, and then I kind of just refined those skills in basic training. So anyway, when I got to Permanent Party in Missouri, I was still just this girl who grew up on this island, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know what the word lesbian was. I don't think I even heard the word lesbian until I was in high school. I didn't even know what gay was necessarily. I just knew that I liked girls, and so when they asked me that question on my, when you go in, back then when you went to the Army, they would ask you, "Are you a homosexual?" That was one of the questions, like name, date of birth, are you a homosexual? And I was like, no, I didn't know. I was just like, no, I was 17, I didn't even know what that meant, really. Just knew I liked girls. So when I got to Permanent Party in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, I worked at a hospital there, General Leonard Wood Memorial Hospital, and I was in the barracks that were right behind the hospital. So all the hospital personnel lived in these barracks unless you were an officer or you had some kind of off-base situation or you had a family. But all the single people, men and women, it was mixed barracks, were in this barracks, a huge barracks, and everybody worked at the hospital, and different, some nurses, some EMTs, some people like me, 91 Sierras, that was my job there. I was stationed in the preventive medicine ward, so it was a very cool job. It was probably one of the greatest jobs I ever had in my life, because I got to do something different. Every 3 months we would rotate. So for 3 months I would work in the VD clinic, and just when I was getting sick of that, 3 months I would do health inspections and be chasing roach coaches around the base, and baiting for cockroaches and counting the number of cockroaches, and then I'd be combing a barracks for crabs, a basic training barracks for crabs, and you just never knew what you were going to get. It was really exciting. It was really academic. I was working around doctors and epidemiologists and people who dealt with communicable disease. It was, it really kind of inspired me to think that, hey, I'm not so dumb after all. Maybe I can be more than what I am right now. So that was an amazing. And the captain of my unit was at the hospital was a really amazing person. He was just a lovely, lovely man, very kind and caring. But anyway, during this time, I met some people in the barracks who were gay, and I started finding out what that meant, and what it meant, and the whole culture thing. And we all spoke in code, and you never could let on because it was not allowed, right? So there was this whole code, this whole culture that I kind of got adopted into of gay men and women in the barracks who were all hiding in plain sight. And it was good. It was really good. It was like, I met my people, you know what I mean? I quickly got adopted by them. We all took care of each other. We all looked out for each other. You learn, I can't remember the code now, but you learned how to speak in tongues, basically, to speak around whatever your experience really was in code, so that nobody who wasn't in on the code would know what you were talking about. And I, got my first girlfriend, who was somebody who was a civilian who lived off post, and it was the 80s, and it was, really cool. I went to my first gay bar in St. Louis, and, it was really coming of age for me, and I thought, I don't think at the time I ever thought it's wrong that I have to hide who I am or that we have to hide who we are, but it was just kind of the way it was, And I heard stories of people getting in trouble for being gay and getting busted for being gay, but I never really gave much thought to it. And then at some point in my tenure at Fort Leonard Wood, a new gal came into the barracks, and just like, you kind of suss the new people out, like, what's this person's story? You kind of throw the code words out to see if they pick up on any of the code words. And we had all figured she was gay because she knew the code words and she was one of us. And she was in my room with me. She was my roommate. And so I think she knew more about me than anybody else. And it turned out she was an undercover agent for the Army's intelligence division. She was not gay. And she had let my commander know that I was a lesbian. And so one day I got called into Sergeant Top's office, and my commander was in there, and they said, "We know you're a lesbian." And they basically put me in handcuffs and took me away. They took me over to, they put me in jail, put me in a jail cell. And then they took me into a room and they literally interrogated me. Two men from the Army's intelligence division interrogated me for, felt like forever, but I think it was like 4 hours, and trying to break me, basically. Tell us who else is gay, or you're getting dishonorably discharged. Tell us who else is gay, or, you'll never, your Army career is over. Tell us who else is gay. Is this person gay? Is this person gay? Is this person gay? What about this person? How do you know this person? What are your associations with this person? Do you know about this bar? Do you know about this? Do you know about this? It was awful. It was awful. And of course I was like, I'm not a snitch. I'm not saying jack shit to anybody, and I didn't say anything. So after that interrogation, they threw me back in jail and let me sit in there for a night, I guess just to scare me, to see if I would say anything. And then they took me back out, and they interrogated me again, this time for a shorter period, but they could see I wasn't going to say anything. So that's what they call a witch hunt, and that was the code. I had been taken down by a witch hunt. That's what they call it back then. So they released me. I was not allowed to work at the hospital anymore, at the job I love. I was taken off duty. I was confined to the barracks. I couldn't go anywhere. Everybody knew that I was gay, so all of my friends who were also gay could not talk to me, could not even be seen anywhere near me, because they didn't want to be implicated. Some people thought I had probably snitched. So some people were like outright, mean to me. Many of the men in the barracks were abusive toward me. And I stayed in this holding pattern for 3 months. And it was right about the time I was due to re-enlist. And I was going to re-enlist. I had every intention of re-enlisting. I knew that they needed preventative medicine specialists overseas. It was a really highly specialized field, and I knew I could have my choice of Korea or Korea or Europe, or I could go anywhere I wanted to. They needed me. I was planning on making the Army my career for life. I had already gotten up to E4, which was kind of unheard of, but I had done so well and performed so well that I got promoted really quickly. So anyway, the last thing they did was they scheduled an appointment for, I think this guy was a psychiatrist. I don't really know he was a doctor. I had to report to the hospital. It was me and him in a room across the table like this, and he asked me the most disgusting questions about being gay that I could think of. He asked me if I put my fingers in women's vaginas. He asked me if I put my tongue on a woman's vagina. He asked me all these sex acts, like specific sexual things, like who does who to what, who's the man, who's the woman, all of these weird things that I had to answer. And he was writing everything down and everything. So I guess that was my last verification that I'm really a dyke. I don't really know. It was pretty traumatic. So after 3 months, with my discharge papers sitting on the commander's desk, all the paperwork was filled out. Article 15, admission of homosexuality. Now it was just a question of, am I going to have a dishonorable discharge or an honorable discharge? My commander of my unit, the captain who was my boss at the hospital, really, I think he did a tremendous service for me in that he lobbied so hard. He lobbied so hard to have me have an honorable discharge when it was just unheard of. It really was unheard of, and that's why my discharge papers sat for so long and why I was in limbo for so long, because he was really, really pushing to get me an honorable discharge. And so finally, word came down that I was out. I had an honorable discharge, pack your shit up, go. And that was it. I got on a bus and took a bus home. My Army career was over. Just a couple months shy of my 4 years and my re-up. That had a lot of long-term effects on my life. I mean, I would never have left. I would never have left. I loved it so much. And then I got out and I became an EMT for a local company in Atlantic City. And I drank a lot. And I did a lot of drugs and made a lot of bad choices and pretty much destroyed my life for the next 3 years. And then a friend of mine who I was stationed in Missouri with, who was also a lesbian, was from Santa Cruz, and she said, you need to come to California. Just come to California and fuck it there. So I had no money. I was like drinking and drugging all my money away, and so I basically bought enough groceries at a Safeway to buy a one-way ticket to LA. So that's what I did. I won this like cheesy one-way ticket to Safeway. I think I bought it for $30 to LA for $30. I packed up my duffel bag and I left. And came to LA. My friend picked me up in LA. We drove to Santa Cruz. And that was in 1989. And I cleaned up, started a new way of life, completely new start. Eventually went to college, got my associates, got my bachelor's, got my master's, got into technology, and here I am. So, one of the things that happened about 7 years ago is because when you got discharged in the Army for having an Article 15 admission of homosexuality, you got no benefits. So until I got to California, and until I realized I had benefits, I had no benefits. I had nothing. I was working for a local company here, and one of the VPs there was a vet. And we were driving around somewhere on a business trip or something, and we were talking about our service, and I basically told him, I got kicked out on an AR-15, and he's like, well, he's like, in California, they don't have this rule, because each Veterans Administration is different state to state, so I didn't get the national benefits. I still don't. But each state has its own set of benefits they can hand out, and California was not like New Jersey, where in California they didn't care as long as you had an honorable discharge, you could qualify for what they had to offer. So he said, you should look into this. You should look into this. And of course, since then, Don't Ask, Don't Tell had happened in the Clinton administration, and which I know was a half step. But believe me, when he passed that, I was very happy, because I knew that my friends would be safe and people wouldn't have to go through what I went through, because it happened all the time. It happened all the time. All the time. And so I went to the Soldiers Legal Defense Fund. I called them, and they said, yeah, you should qualify for benefits. You have an honorable discharge, So I was like, really? I couldn't believe it. So that was a pretty pivotal moment for me. And I called the California Vet Department, and I think I even went down when it was over here. I don't know where it is now, but it was on Front Street in the old vet building, and talked to somebody. They're like, yeah. Yeah. So I was like, great. So now I know I'll have a military burial, and that'll be paid for. And if I need to go into a home, I could go into the home in Palo Alto and be taken care of. So that was huge. That was huge. It was huge. It was huge. So at the same time, I got married, but it wasn't legal. It was this whole thing, with Prop 8 going on, and it was really intense. Just trying to get my rights back. And so it was a little step. And then when Prop 8 happened, and the first day you could get married, my wife and I, who had already been married for years, but not legally, went to the courthouse and we got married, and then the whole thing where it got overturned, and it was just like this huge churning, horrible thing with who cares with who I sleep with, and then some point in there, I'm not sure of the timing, but I remember I was working on my master's degree, and I was at my computer, and my wife and daughter came home and walked in the door, and Ann said, "Did you hear what happened on the radio?" And I'm like, "What happened on the radio? What happened?" She's like, "President Obama just said that, they just passed a law. It's not legal. You can't discriminate against gays. It's okay to be gay in the military." And I broke down. I was so happy, just was so relieved, and so overjoyed and proud of my country in that moment. And it felt like all that stuff that had happened to me wasn't vain. So it was an unbelievable moment in my life. I'll never forget that day. And then once that happened, then I could apply for a VA loan. Then I could start getting the national benefits. And, it turned out the VA loan wasn't that great. I didn't take it, but, it was like, okay, I'm like fully fledged now, My next fight is to get the admission of homosexuality off of my DD-214, and to get the AR-15 off of my DD-214. I don't think it's fair that it's on there. And now I'm too old to re-enlist, because it really, honestly, I'd be there in a heartbeat. I would be there in a heartbeat. And the closest I come is to working at nonprofits, which I've done, and of course, working for my city that I love. And just being a public servant. And that's pretty much why I'm here at the library, is because I believe in public service. And so, but now I'm too old and too fat, so. But yeah, I mean, if my country called me, I'd be there in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. So, that's where I'm at. I don't really know what to do about the Article 15 on my DD-214s. I think I'll probably just contact the Soldiers Legal Defense Fund and see if I can get something changed. I thought about maybe writing a letter to Congressman Farr to see if he could do something about it. But, I know if it's me, there's thousands of others who also have that mark. It's unnecessary. It's stupid. So, that's kind of where I'm at now in my life. So, but honestly, if something happened and they said, we need people who know cybersecurity, or we need people who, whatever, I'd be down in a heartbeat. Sign me up. So, and I don't think that'll ever go away, even with everything that happened. So, that's it.
Well, I think you covered everything. And I can't imagine that there'd be any other, is there a message that you would leave to others? Wow.
I think my message would be, members of the military who are gay are the most dedicated, most amazing people, and they deserve our respect.
Absolutely. That's a good one.
And I think we need to recognize what went on in the past and not gloss that over, and honor it as part of the steps this country had to take to make things right. And I just pray that it's really right now, and it's, that the homophobia and the hatred is really stopped. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, sorry I got so teary.
No. Wow. I think we're done.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to sit here for a minute.
Yeah, no, I think we all are going to sit here for a minute.
My mind goes
that was-
to, like, you should send your interview off to